What's up everyone? Thanks for watching. Today I'm going to give you a quick tour around my shop. I'm going to show you some of the equipment that I've been using for the last few years, why I like them and why I don't like them, and what I'd hope to upgrade to in the future. So stick around and I'll show you around. So this is my shop. It's a 24-foot deep by 21-foot wide two-car garage. The door behind the camera goes into my living room, so that limits a little bit of the times that I can work out here without waking up the family. There's a 6-foot by 6-foot corner of this garage that's taken up by the laundry room. I hope to one day be able to move that to a different part of the house and gain that space. But what I'm left with is a pretty large area to be able to build just about any project that I want. So at the center of my shop is a 3-horsepower saw stop table saw. I love this saw. I've had it for about 2 years. Before this I had a Craftsman hybrid saw, which worked great, and I used it for about 10 years until I wore it completely out and it just wouldn't run any longer, and then I was able to upgrade to this. It has 36-inch rails, a great fence system, and a large outfeed table that I built out of melamine and some dimensional lumber I got from Home Depot. No complaints. This thing's great. It will be the center of my shop for hopefully a lot of years to come. So in this corner of the shop is where I keep my dust collector. It's a 2-horsepower Harbor Freight dust collector. It's worked pretty well for the last 10 years. The switch did break to turn it on and off, so now I just unplug it and plug it in when I'm using it. I will eventually either fix the switch or get a remote for it or replace this with something a little bit nicer, but for now this seems to work pretty well, so I'll stick with it. It has a chip separator, which makes it nice not to have to change that bag out all the time. I don't have dedicated dust collection at each machine, so I got to move the 4-inch hose to each area, but that's not too big of a pain for me. I don't mind. So moving over from the dust collector, this is my newest addition to the shop. It's a 1938 Supermax drum sander. I've been really happy with it so far, but I haven't got a ton of use out of it yet. I've sanded down some cutting boards and some wide boards for practice, some thin strips and a couple of things like that, but hope to do a review on this in the future. But it's nice. It works really well. I got the in-feed and out-feed table with it, and it's on a roll-around cart, so I can pull it out when I need it and put it back up against the wall when I don't. Can sand 19-inch boards in here, and then I can do 38-inch board if I run it through and then flip it over and run it through the other way. So that should come in handy. I hope in the future to do a couple of guitar projects, and this would be nice to sand some thin strips down for the back and top and back of an acoustic guitar. Next up is my DeWalt 735 planer. I've had this for about 10 years. I've been woodworking for about 14-15 years, so most of my equipment is in that 10 to 12 year range, except for a few additions that I've made lately. This thing has been great. I've used this for just about every project. Most of my projects start with rough cut wood, so they all see the joiner and the planer, and no complaints. I just replaced the belt on this recently, and I got to do the blades every once in a while. I thought about upgrading to the helical head, but I don't see the need to spend that kind of money. So far it's working great. So I think this is about as good as it gets for lunchbox planers until you get up to like a big standalone 15-inch unit, and I have no plans on replacing it. I'm going to run it until it dies. Oh, so also underneath this is where I keep my rigid oscillating belt sander. This is a pretty good tool. I don't use it a ton, but it does come in handy every once in a while. I thought about making a flip top bench where I keep the planer on the top and this guy on the bottom and just flip it up when I need it, but I don't use it enough to where I really need to do that. So when I need it, I just pull it out and put it on my workbench or put it on the outfeed table of the table saw, and it works really well. So this is my tool chest. It has all of my hand saws, hand planes, chisels, all my hand tool woodworking stuff in it. It sits right behind my workbench, so I can easily, within arm's reach, grab everything I need. This is Chris Swartz's design from the Anarchist toolbox, and it's a great design. And that's a great book if you're interested in getting into hand tool woodworking. That book is a good guide to tell you what tools that you should start with or what tools you should have in your arsenal. It has a couple of drawers in it. from a number 7 hand plane down to number 3, and then a low angle smoother. Only thing I really want to add to this is hope to add a number 62 low angle jack plane. But other than that, this is a great box to work out of. One thing I will say about this is that it takes up a lot of floor space, and I've considered, although I love this thing and I'd probably just go in a bedroom as a blanket chest or something for a while until I have like a big standalone shop, I considered making a hanging tool chest on the back wall. One, that would be a good backdrop for videos, and 2, I would free up all this floor space. I don't know exactly what I'd put here yet, but it'd be nice to just have the extra space to set a project if I'm working on it or whatever. So I thought about making something in the back, and I might do that in the future, but this is a pretty cool tool to have, or chest to have, and I'm pretty happy with it. And here is my wood lathe. It's a 12 by 36 Harbor Freight lathe. I've had this for about 10 years as well, and it's okay. It's not the greatest, but to learn how to turn on, for I think 150 bucks after the coupons and all that stuff, this was a good deal. It has had some problems. The bolts stripped out fairly quickly. The back handle here for the tailstock snapped on my last project. The belt makes a ton of noise, but it's cast iron bed and a little bit of flimsy base, but it's pretty solid. And I've made probably 1,000 pens, pepper grinders and platters and plates, different little projects and stuff on it. So just getting into turning, or the amount of turning I do this thing, I'll just keep limping it along. Eventually I'll get a nicer one, but I'm in no hurry, so this will work for now. Okay, next up is my toolbox. I was an automotive mechanic up till about 12 years ago, working on Ford and Chrysler. I was mostly a Jeep mechanic, and this is the box that I made a living out of. So it's pretty large. It takes up the back wall of my shop. There's a couple additional pieces to it that I keep in a shed out back. I love this thing, except for it takes up so much room in the shop, and there's nothing woodworking related in it. It's all automotive tools. So every time I consider getting rid of it or thinking about taking it out of here, I just can't bring myself to do it. So eventually I'll have a large shop out back and a freestanding building or something, and when I do, I'll be glad that I kept this. Until then, it's kind of in the way, but I just can't bring myself to let it go. So it'll stay. Okay, so wrapping around the corner, this is the 6 foot by 6 foot laundry room, and it will bring you to my 14-inch jet bandsaw. So I picked this thing up on Craigslist. It was practically brand new. It had the riser block with it and a mobile base. It had not been used maybe once just to try it out, and the guy was getting out of the hobby. I never get that lucky. I'm always looking on Craigslist. I'm always scouring for a deal on whatever tool it is I'm looking for at the time, and I'll spend months looking, and I never find it, and then I go pay full price for it, and then somebody shows me a deal 4 weeks later that I missed out on. But I did get lucky on this one, so I'm pretty stoked on that. I added this Craig fence to it, and if I'm resawing, I have a little radius block that I use so that I can kind of freehand the resaw. So coming around from the bandsaw, behind the laundry room is a small work surface and a cabinet space that I have. A couple of cabinets built up above that I keep my finishing projects in, or products in, belts for the drum sander, dado stacks, screws, and that type of stuff. There's a makeshift saw till between the two cabinets. Let's see what else I got. Keep my screw guns and nail guns, and I have a little station for all my sandpapers and sanding blocks and steel wool and glue and that type of stuff. Yeah, underneath the surface, I have a mortising machine and biscuit joiner and some sanders. In the back cubby, I have a grinding wheel, a buffing wheel, and a HVLP sprayer. So coming around the corner from that work surface, I have the first real workbench that I built. It is made of a bunch of different hardwoods that I picked up from somebody local, and I can't stand it. I built it, and I thought I would love the design, but I don't. There's a few things wrong with it that I'll explain real quick. Has a weird saw till kind of towards the middle of it that I thought that I would enjoy using or would save my tools, but it just gets in the way when I tried to use it. The bench overall is like 38 inches tall, which is way too tall for me. It doesn't give you any leverage when working with hand tools. So let's see what else. I learned that I like to have the front legs flush with the face of the bench, because it makes it easier to work on large panels and stuff like that. So I built a bigger bench that I'll show you here in a couple minutes, but for now this thing's just stuffed in the corner. So this is also where I keep my sharpening station. It just holds 3 stones, very cheap, down and dirty project. I'm probably going to make another one to make a video for that as well, with a few more features. But I did secure it to the top. I put a couple of dowels in it that fits down in the dog hole so it doesn't slide around too much when I'm using it. It does make quite a big mess over here, but it works pretty good for what I need. All right, moving on from the workbench, I'll get to my router table. This is a down and dirty router table. I used some plywood that I got when I moved in the house, like it was in the garage already. It is the most basic thing. I made a simple cabinet, a few drawers on the side where I keep all my router bits and wrenches for the different routers and stuff. Underneath I have a dovetail jig that I've used one time and never used again, and then I keep my palm router and a couple additional routers down there. The fence is just made of MDF. It's nothing fancy. I would like to make a better version of this at some point. In fact, I just watched Third Coast Craftsman, and he built a router lift into his table saw extension, and it's amazing looking. And I'm really seriously considering going and getting all that stuff and just throwing this whole thing out, starting over. But for now, this is what I got. The fence moves by a couple of wedges on the sides. I can adjust the fence back and forth and then tighten down these wedges that grab onto the lip on the top of this melamine surface. And the router is just literally screwed in to the base with a hole cut in the top. No lift, no plate, no nothing like that. I just haven't needed much else. I try to avoid using the router if I can. It's noisy and messy, and if I can do it another way, I'll try to do it another way. But this is a decent solution for what I got, until eventually I make something nicer. Okay, so here we are at the miter saw station. This is a Hitachi C10 FSH. It's the first machine that I purchased from my shop, and this thing has seen a ton of use. I've used this to put in laminate floors in my house, friends' houses, my wife's hair salon, and this thing gets used on just about every project, cutting boards down to size. I would love to have the Bosch Glide 12-inch saw to get this closer to the wall and have that 12-inch capacity, but while this thing's working, I just can't bring myself to do it. I'd also like to build a better miter saw station with some nice wings and stop blocks and stuff, but I don't want to build it for this saw and then it gives out on me and then I have to go remake one for the Bosch. So if I do make that project here soon, it'll probably be made to fit the Bosch dimensions, and then I'll just adapt this saw to use on there. All right, across from the miter saw is my 6-inch rigid joiner. Again, another tool that I've had probably 12, 13 years, and it works great. Like I said before, I use rough cut boards most of the time, so everything sees the planer and the joiner, and this thing's held up great. Sometimes it's a little hard to find blades for it, but other than that, it turns on every time, and it makes pretty good cuts. So I've been happy with it. I am very seriously looking at the Grizzly 8-inch or maybe possibly the 10-inch joiner, but it will require me to bring some more 220 power over here, and I have a breaker box that's completely full right now, so it's a little bit of a bigger task. I will upgrade eventually to an 8 or 10-inch joiner with a helical head, but for now this tool works pretty well. So the last couple things to talk about on this wall is this small benchtop Delta drill press that I got. I've had this thing for years as well. I use it to cut or drill pen blanks, attach a wire wheel for it. The main reason I got it was originally I didn't have that rigid oscillating drum sander, so I have some drum attachments that I could attach here. I have a mortising attachment that I could use the drill press for, but nowadays it just basically drills pen blanks for me and cleans up some metal parts with a wire wheel. It is sitting on top of my first woodworking project. You know, outside of being a kid working in my grandfather's shop. I tried to do mortise and tenon joinery, and this piece didn't quite make the cut to make it inside and use in the living room, but I can't throw it out for now. I use it as this stand, but you can see there's some pretty big gaps and some glue all over this thing. And anyways, it's pretty bad to look at, but I keep it around so when I'm frustrated or think I can't pick up this skill or I'm not getting any better at the craft, I can come over and take a look at it and realize, yeah, maybe I've gotten just a little bit better over the years. On the other side and above the miter saw, I have some wood storage. I have a shed in the backyard of the house that I keep most of my lumber in, but I do have some offcuts and some smaller pieces here that I also hang on to. And then also stuffed around the garage and up against the walls, some sheet goods and smaller offcuts and stuff. Oh, before I leave this area, underneath the assembly table of the table saw is pretty empty except for I keep these two sawhorses. I made these a few years back. This is a design from Popular Woodworking. I did it using all hand tools. I was on a kick for a couple of years to just do all hand tool woodworking. I didn't want to use any machines. Since I've left that idea, I still use a lot of hand tools and love using them, but for rough dimensioning, it definitely makes life easier to have machines. So I made these with all hand tools, and I learned a lot of new skills. That's a pretty cool, I don't know if they still have that on Popular Woodworking where you can watch that class and build these, but they were fun to make, and these things are solid. They fit my workbench well. I use this as a seat most of the time, and I finish almost all my projects on top of these, so they're full of paint and different varnishes and stuff. I am going to make another set, and I'll show you guys a video on that soon. And only reason is I want to make one of them will probably be exactly like this, and the second one will probably have a way that I can just stack it on top of it and gain myself some more room. But I love this design and I love these sawhorses, but I will make something new that's a little bit stackable and I can free up some more space with it. Okay, so the hub of my shop, equally as important as my table saw, is my workbench. This is a 24-inch wide, 4-inch thick, and 6 feet long Roubeau style workbench that I made probably 5 or 6 years ago. This thing fixes a lot of the problems that the first workbench I showed you had, but I did learn over the years it's almost perfect but not quite perfect. There's a few things that I want to upgrade. So one of my next projects is going to be to build a new workbench with bench crafted hardware, split top design, something real original that nobody has. It's out there and it's popular and everybody does it because it's functional and it works really well. And so the couple of deficiencies that I have with this bench I think will be solved with the split top Roubeau bench and that bench crafted hardware. So some details about this bench is it's heavy, 350, 400 pounds I think, and it has a leg vise that I made with pretty cheap screw. I think that was like 50 or 60 bucks. But I did make some mistakes. When I made the glide for this, the rail has holes in it that you can put a pin in and helps you clamp the board down up top. I made that board too thin and I spaced the holes a little too close to each other, so when I started putting a lot of pressure on it, I busted the glide apart. So in 3 or 4 spots that's broken now, and I can still use it and it's still functional most of the time. And if I can't make it line up to one of the holes for a board I need, then I'd use like the J-bait style wedge. That's pretty clever and works well. But my new bench will have bench crafted and the crisscross design on it, so I'm pretty stoked on that. The tail vise works pretty well. I made a homemade rail system for it, so it runs back and forth pretty smooth. Where I messed up on that was that I inset that too deep into the bench. It's about 5 inches in, and it only makes a difference when I'm planing boards with like a shoulder plane that has a fence on it or a plow plane with a fence on it, and I want to get my workpiece up close to the edge, or hanging over the edge so the fence doesn't hit the workbench. It's just a minor inconvenience. It's not, I don't run into that problem too much. I did add this planing stop. It's just held in with a couple of studs and wing nuts. I can lift it up, put a board up against it, and start running a hand plane across it. It's just easier than throwing it in a vise sometimes. I will probably incorporate that into my next bench as well. So this is my workbench, and this has been my workshop. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm about 15 videos in right now, and I'm having a really good time. The projects have been really basic so far. I did that mostly so I can learn how to video stuff and edit. That seems a lot harder than woodworking. And but I'm starting to get the swing of it a little bit, and hopefully the video content gets better and the projects will definitely get more in depth and a little bit more complicated. So stick around and stay tuned for that stuff. Thanks for watching.